So it's 5:30 in the morning, just lying on my bed, going through my phone.
Hear something in the woods, you tell me. Hello, my name is Ross Turner, aka Mr. Turner, and welcome back to another video. Now, to those of you who have subscribed to me, I know this is a bit of a different video from the regular, as I do show my face. So this is not a video due to the fact that I dropped my phone and the camera is a little bit cracked. I just need to repair that. Without further ado, let's dive into today's topic.
Mama, I made it to Forbes.
His family died
you were masturbating effect with that function, and so it goes in the opposite direction, and instead of constipating or baseline, the person going through withdrawal has diarrhea and stomach cramping and nausea and stomach pain. It's awful, and those are just some of the opioid withdrawal symptoms that come from this syndrome. So there's two classes of symptoms when you're going through acute withdrawal. One is the mental symptoms. So that's things like extreme anxiety, total depression and fear, the inability to focus. And then there's the physical symptoms. So again, I was just talking about the diarrhea and the stomach cramping and pain. People also can vomit during withdrawal, and a lot of people get restless legs and restless arms and just overall a really restless body. One time, the worst withdrawal I went through was when I was coming off a gram of heroin a day. And I tell you, I was laying down and I thought my leg was going to kick me all the way down the street. My legs were just kicking, my body was moving around. And then there's the physical symptoms. So again, the person going through withdrawal has diarrhea and stomach cramping. And so it goes in the opposite direction, and instead of constipating or baseline, the person going through withdrawal has diarrhea and stomach cramping and nausea and stomach pain. It's awful, and those are just some of the opioid withdrawal symptoms that come from this syndrome. So there's two classes of symptoms when you're going through acute withdrawal. One is the mental symptoms. So that's things like extreme anxiety, total depression and fear, the inability to focus. And then there's the physical symptoms. So again, I was just talking about the diarrhea and the stomach cramping and pain. People also can vomit during withdrawal, and a lot of people get restless legs and restless arms and just overall a really restless body. One time, the worst withdrawal I went through was when I was coming off 1 gram of heroin a day. And I tell you, I was laying down and I thought my leg was going to kick me all the way down the street. My legs were just kicking, my body was moving around. I was just flopping around. It sucked. I went to the hospital because I couldn't get any withdrawal remedies. So I went there and they gave me some a lot of people get restless legs and restless arms and just overall a really restless body. One time, the worst withdrawal I went through was when I was coming off 1 gram of heroin a day. And I tell you, I was laying down and I thought my leg was going to kick me all the way down the street. My legs were just kicking, my body was moving around. I was just flopping around. It sucked. I went to the hospital because I couldn't get any withdrawal remedies, so I went there and they gave me some tramadol and Librium. So yeah, those helped a lot. But anyways, you also can get sweating and hot and cold flashes and that gross goose flesh feeling. It's totally awful. And then there's even more. These are just some of the most common symptoms. And the thing that really sucks about opioid withdrawal is the mental symptoms. So if it was just the physical symptoms, if you just had all those ones below, yeah, that would suck. That would really feel horrible. But if you had a balanced mood, you were feeling okay mentally, emotionally, it wouldn't be 1/10 as bad. It wouldn't be, it would just be so much better. The reason why opioid withdrawal is, in my opinion, the most horrific experience from drugs and drug use is because you have the synergy of the mental or psychological symptoms combined with the physical symptoms. So those two together make it the most feared thing. Like everyone that's dependent on opioids, their greatest fear is getting this sickness, getting these symptoms when they come off. And, gosh, we'll do so much to keep the dependence going so we don't have to experience this. So now let's talk about the acute withdrawal timeline. So again, I was saying in the overview video that they can differ a lot. They can differ between months depending on what type of opioids you're coming off. So if you're taking a short-acting opioid like hydrocodone, oxycodone, heroin, short-acting morphine, or any other short-acting opioids, it's typically 4 days, and here's how it goes. The first day does not feel good whatsoever. The second, depending on what type off, and gosh, we'll do so much to keep the dependence going. So we a lot. They can differ between months depending on what type of opioids you're coming off. So if you're taking a short-acting opioid like hydrocodone, oxycodone, heroin, short-acting morphine, or any other short-acting opioids, it's typically 4 days, and here's how it goes. The first day does not feel good whatsoever. The second day gets a whole lot worse. Maybe it doubles in intensity. It's typically 4 days. Short-acting opioid like hydrocodone, oxycodone, heroin, short-acting morphine, or any other short-acting opioids. It's typically 4 days, and here's how it goes. The first day does not feel good whatsoever. The second day gets a whole lot worse. Maybe it doubles in intensity and severity. And then days 3 to 4 are the peak of the opioid withdrawal symptom severity. So again, it's about 4 days long. On the 5th day, you wake up, and it's a lot better. It still feels really shitty. Still feels really bad. Excuse my language. But it gets a lot better. So again, the first day sucks, the second day is way worse, and days 3 and 4 are hell on earth. But then day 5, you're technically over with it usually. For some people, the short-acting opioid withdrawal timeline can last up to 7 days. That kind of has to do with how fast or slow people's opioid drug metabolisms are. Depending on the short-acting opioid and that person's individual biochemistry, maybe how long they've been taking it for. Rarely it lasts up to 7 days for the acute withdrawal. Typically, it's usually days 1 through 4, and then it starts to get better. A little bit, very slowly. And then the long-acting opioid withdrawal timeline is different. Since these long-acting opioids, such as buprenorphine and methadone, since they bind to your receptors so strong and they take so long to come out of your opioid receptors, the withdrawal timeline typically is about 7 to 14 days, and the severity is a little bit different too. So let's say, for instance, you've been taking 8 milligrams of buprenorphine for the last 2 years. Well, you can go the first 1 or 2 days typically and not really feel bad at all. Maybe you have a little bit less energy, your mood's not as good, but it takes so long for both buprenorphine and methadone to come out of your receptors after you've been taking it for some time that, you typically don't start to feel pretty bad until either day 3 or day 4. Some people can make it 2 days feeling good. Some people can make it even 3 or 4 days feeling good. Some people can even make it longer, but typically between about 3 to 7 days detoxing from a long-acting opioid, that's when your symptoms, the mild to moderate symptoms will start to increase. And so, yeah, it's about a 7 to 14 day process for the acute withdrawal timeline. But in some circumstances, like when people have been on buprenorphine long term and then of like high dosages and they come off cold turkey, or if someone's been on methadone long term and they just detox cold turkey, I've seen a lot of cases where the acute withdrawal lasts about 1 to 3 months. I used to be a counselor at an opiate treatment program, and they prescribed Suboxone, Subutex, methadone, and Vivitrol. And I had, 85 to 90, sometimes 100 patients on my caseload. So I counseled a lot of people, and I did intakes for a lot of people. And so since I had this gigantic group of this population, I heard lots of stories. So some of the patients that I had, they would be on like maybe 100 milligrams of methadone. For instance, this one guy he was like 19 years old. He was on 120 milligrams of methadone, and he had been on it for, I don't know, probably around 8 or 9 months. He got arrested. He was doing heroin on the side. Got arrested for having heroin, went to jail for 6 weeks, and that whole entire 6 weeks, he said he was in acute withdrawal. He had diarrhea. He said he did not sleep a wink for the first 4 weeks. And imagine being in jail and you cannot sleep and you're going through acute cold turkey methadone withdrawal. Oh my gosh, it made all of my previous withdrawals seem like nothing because I always did it at my own house. And even though it was bad, I never came off a huge amount of methadone cold turkey in jail. So yeah, it can last up to I've never heard of anything longer than 3 months. That's pretty much the most severe I've heard. But, do not come off high levels of methadone or buprenorphine cold turkey because the withdrawal will last forever. And then look at this note at the bottom. So tapering is when you systematically reduce your dosage over a period of time. That can actually, if you do that right, if you taper the right way, that can prevent the acute withdrawal syndrome. So typically the longer you draw out a taper, the less withdrawal symptoms you have. I've had a lot of coaching clients that have opted to do the taper route, and they said that, they did not have an acute withdrawal. They did not feel great. They didn't feel their total best when they came off, but they didn't feel too bad. And they were also taking supplements, and many of them were exercising and at least focusing a little bit on nutrition. So all that stuff can help. And that's how to avoid the acute withdrawal. Also, the way you can avoid the acute withdrawal is by taking certain either prescription medications, over-the-counter medicines, natural drugs, or a combination thereof, and other opioid withdrawal remedies. But if you check out some of my other videos, I've got a ton of different videos on all those different withdrawal remedies. So now, once somebody makes it past the acute withdrawal, then the battle is not over. Then comes the post-acute withdrawal syndrome, also known as PAWS. So PAWS is a biopsychosocial syndrome, and it results from the damage that drugs have done to the brain, and it's a combination of that plus having to live life and cope with stress without the drugs that you've been so accustomed to using to help you cope with life and help give you whatever benefits they were giving you. So PAWS, again, it's a biopsychosocial syndrome, and it's also got its own set of symptoms, and a lot of them are the same symptoms as the acute withdrawal, only they're not as bad. They're to a lesser degree, so things like anxiety, insomnia, fatigue, or extreme exhaustion. Feels like your battery pack is unplugged, you just have no juice in your batteries. Depression and hopelessness, also known as anhedonia, which is the inability to feel pleasure. It's basically pleasure deafness. Weakness, and then increased sensitivity to both physical and emotional pain, attention deficit problems, and much more too. So yeah, there can be a lot of different mental and physical post-acute withdrawal symptoms, but again, they're not typically as bad as the acute withdrawal. But the thing that really sucks about these is they last a lot longer. These symptoms can linger on a minimum of about 2 to 3 weeks. Now, if somebody does a real good job tapering, or if somebody does a really good job with medications and supplements and other things for the acute withdrawal, and then they really get into a good PAWS recovery program, then they can have a pretty darn easy time with this. I've seen it happen time and time again, especially with a lot of my coaching clients. A lot of them can get back to feeling 100% of energy and mood, and even better than they felt before opioids. But at the very minimum, that takes about 2 to 3 weeks. I don't think I've ever seen it faster than 2 weeks is the very fastest. More typically, about 3 to 6 weeks to get back to 100%. Now, you can feel decent during that time if you do the right stuff, but a lot of people do not know how to heal from post-acute withdrawal syndrome effectively and fast. So what often happens is people experience these PAWS symptoms for about 1 to 3 months. That's the most common. Less often, some people will experience for 3 to 6 months, but it does happen quite a bit. And then in severe cases, the symptoms can still last, at least to some degree, for 6 to 12 months or longer if the person does not address the biochemical imbalances that opioid dependence either caused or exacerbated. So that's post-acute withdrawal. And hey, if you like this, you'll
that you're about to see is my transition from methadone maintenance back to Suboxone. I wanted to document